Moving on to our final group of five school when we're talking about college basketball here. That's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I want to make this disclaimer. We didn't make it at the beginning of the podcast, but as we talk about each of these teams, we want to remind you that you guys know your team better than us. So if there's something we missed, or something you think we should have said or anything like that, be sure to let us know down in the comment section, and let us know what you think we missed or what your predictions are. We'd definitely love to hear them.
And we are recording this show
right
prior to exhibition games even beginning. So if you are watching this show a couple of days out from the start of the regular season and a player that we have mentioned has gone down with an injury by then, that is why we are talking about said player as a player to watch, because we haven't even gotten close to the season yet.
Their 2022-23 season, they're not ranked, of course, or not receiving votes or anything like that, so nothing to talk about really there. But the last of the three teams that we're going to really focus on and highlight, last year they finished 11-21, 3-17 in ACC play. They were the 14th seed in the conference tournament, lost to Virginia Tech in the first round. That was, of course, the last season under head coach Mike Brey. They bring in Penn State head coach Micah Shrewsberry this spring to be the new coach. And not much to talk about as far as returnees. That's not saying that they don't have capable players. It's just that they lost a lot coming off of last season. Their notable returnee is forward Matt Zona. He's a senior. He averaged 2 points per game in 20 games for the Irish last season. And like we said with IU, a lot of turnover for the Irish coming into the season. According to CBSSports.com, no one on the roster scored more than 4.5 points per game last season. They lost all 5 starters from a year ago. Their notable matchups, they play Auburn in the Legends Classic. They will play either Oklahoma State or St. Bonaventure to follow should they win that game. I guess they also have the consolation ladder, so they'll play one of those teams regardless. They're at number 5 Marquette in December. In ACC play, they've got a tough schedule. 11 games versus teams projected to finish in the top half of the conference. They open up conference play at Miami. Their ACC home opener is against Virginia. They face number 2 Duke at home on January 6th, at Cameron Indoor on February 7th. And their final 4 games are versus Wake, versus Clemson, at number 19 UNC, and at Virginia Tech. Of course, all of those teams projected to finish in the top half of the Atlantic Coast Conference. Players to watch, or a player to watch for Notre Dame. And there's not a ton to choose from, but there's going to be a lot of players to watch, because if you're a fan of Notre Dame, you're just going to be watching this team kind of, start to build chemistry and kind of become a cohesive unit. But I'm going to go with Julian Roper II. He's a transfer from Northwestern. He averaged 4 points per game last season, 4 rebounds per game. He shot 45% from the floor last season with the Wildcats. He didn't start a game. He did get 22 minutes per game. By last season totals, he's projected to be the leading scorer on the Irish, just based on last year's points per game. His career numbers, he averages 4 points per game, 4 rebounds. He's a 37% three-point shooter and 38% from the floor. He also has 15 starts to his belt. There's not a lot going on for the Irish coming into this season, so it seems like statistically he is the best scorer they have coming in and will be a focal point on the roster this season. So I'm going with Julian Roper II.
I'm going with freshman Indiana Mr. Basketball Marcus Burton out of Penn. He's kind of okay, so he's got a lot of comparisons to Purdue's Braden Smith. And if that's the kind of player you can get to start building around your team around, that's a good comp for a player you want leading your team. He's going to be a strong leader. He's going to play some solid defense. He's going to put up points. He was basically a player that all the Purdue fans wanted Purdue to try to land, but there was no need for him with the emergence of Braden Smith. And I think if you give Micah Shrewsberry the opportunity to have a player like a Marcus Burton, he's gonna do some special things with him. I mean, not like Final Four special, but this is the type of player that he's going to be a 4-year player. He's probably going to be a 4-year starter if I had to guess. and he's going to be that key centerpiece as this team grows and as Micah Shrewsberry puts in the system in place that he wants. And look, dating all the way back to when Micah Shrewsberry was an assistant the first time at Purdue, this is a guy that players love to play for. He knows how to get the most out of his players. It's a big reason why Brad Stevens, well, Matt Painter originally stole him from Butler, and then Brad Stevens wanted him back, and Micah Shrewsberry went to Boston with Brad Stevens for a while, and then came back to Purdue, and then to eventually take over the Penn State job. And he turned Penn State around pretty quick. Penn State was not great, and then look, they were Big Ten runner-ups last year in the conference tournament. Played very, very solid basketball. So I think Micah Shrewsberry could potentially get this team turned around quicker than anticipated. Not saying that they're going to be contending for an ACC title, but they're going to be competitive. They're not just going to be an easy win for these top teams. It's going to be tough. He's going to make it tough on these top teams to come into South Bend. And I think I have a little bit more confidence in Notre Dame because Micah Shrewsberry is their head coach now.
Well, you've been more optimistic on the podcast. I've been a little bit more pessimistic, so we'll see how the hotter.
Well, I'm not saying they're going to have a good year.
I know.
I don't want to get that confused.
I was just segueing into.
They're in a good situation to have Micah Shrewsberry as their head coach now,
right?
And to have a player coming in as a freshman like Marcus Burton, who kind of just embodies solid basketball, which Micah Shrewsberry loves to have in a player.
Right. Hot or cold question for Notre Dame. The take is this: Notre Dame will finish in the top half of the ACC in Micah Shrewsberry's first year as head coach. That's a cold take for me. Not a whole lot to get into here. Micah Shrewsberry has a long rebuild ahead of him. 5 out of 6 ACC experts on CBSSports.com have them picked to finish last in the ACC. Lots of transfers coming in. Not a lot of proven talent on the roster. Plus, the ACC is always one of the toughest conferences in the sport. It's going to be a long year for the Irish. I'd say what? Well, because how many games in conference play? I would say 20. I'd say a 25% winning percentage would be maybe a win for Notre Dame this year in the ACC.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a cold take. You're right. He does have a long rebuild ahead of him. Look, yeah, I know I said he turned things around pretty quickly with Penn State. And he can do that with Notre Dame as well. I just don't think it's going to be quite as easy because at Penn State, you're a Big Ten program. You're right there near Philadelphia, and there's a lot of really strong basketball there. So trying to convince players coming out of Philadelphia saying, hey, come play in the Big Ten is a lot easier of a task than now coming into South Bend, Indiana, and recruiting players in the state of Indiana against Purdue, against IU. It's going to be a lot harder. He could probably go into Chicago if he wanted to, but it's going to be a lot harder of a rebuild just because when he was at Penn State, Penn State was it. Outside of maybe like Temple, I guess.
You've also got like Pitt,
Villanova, Pitt, but he really tapped in well into Philadelphia while he was at Penn State, and that helped him with his turnaround. He brought in, I think there was some guys that were like 3 of these guys were high school teammates. So when you have you can bring that kind of chemistry in, it helps. But it's going to be a little bit harder to have that turnaround at Notre Dame. I have a feeling. So, but that's definitely a cold take.